Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Help for Ukraine. This is a special World Council of Credit Unions and Regional Credit Union Center for Central and Eastern Europe virtual event. My name is Greg Newman. I'm Director of Communications for World Council. Today's webinar is designed to share information with you about the realities on the ground that credit unions and their members in Ukraine are facing due to the Russian invasion of their country, which has been going on now for the past 2.5 months. It's also going to focus on how World Council, our worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions, and the National Association of Cooperative Savings and Credit Unions of Poland, its credit unions, employees and members are all providing humanitarian support in the short term, and how we all plan to help with the recovery and rebuilding of Ukrainian credit unions in the long term. Today's 90-minute event is going to feature presentations from Eva Sierzyńska, Chief of Party for World Council's Credit for Agriculture Producers Project, or CAP project. That is a USAID-funded activity in Ukraine that's been ongoing since 2016. Andy Price, Senior Vice President of International Advocacy and General Counsel for World Council of Credit Unions. Mike Ryder, Executive Director of Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions, which manages the Ukrainian Credit Union Displacement Fund. And we'll also be joined by Pavel Peltz, Coordinator for the Regional Credit Union Center for Central and Eastern Europe, and Piotr Palka, Head of Compliance and Legal Counsel for Poland's National Association of Cooperative Savings and Credit Unions. Pavel and Peter are also going to talk about the assistance Polish credit unions are providing for Ukraine. And if any questions come into your mind as you're listening to today's presentations, feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. You'll find it down there. You can type in your questions, and I'll be asking questions of our speakers as time allows at the end of this event. We're going to begin now with our first presenter of the day. Eva Sierzyńska is the Chief of Party for World Council of Credit Unions Credit for Agricultural Producers, or CAP project. Eva's expertise is in economic development and financial inclusion. She has over 15 years of experience working with agencies such as USAID, the World Bank, UN Women, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, as well as consulting companies and other international NGOs. And along with her experience in Ukraine and other parts of Eastern Europe, she's also worked for projects in the Middle East, as well as West and Central Africa. Eva, thanks for being here. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Greg, for introductions. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today, this morning, afternoon, or the evening. I guess I don't need to introduce myself anymore, so I start with briefly talking about the project that we have in Ukraine since 2016, and that's for how long I've lived and worked with our great partners in Ukraine. So the project initially has the overall goal of the project is to reach as many agricultural producers and give them access to credit. And that's what we've been trying to do since day one. And how we doing it is through the credit unions, and that are our partners, and improving and also helping them get better at agricultural lending, be more efficient, and we also work with the regulator to provide an enabling environment for their operations in Ukraine. And so far, and this is an estimate, we managed to disperse, our partners managed to disperse with our support, close to 16,000 agro loans for close to $22 million. Why I'm saying it's an estimate, since the war began, we do not have statistics from all our partners for these reasons. We also don't have data from the regulator to cross-check and verify. We also, in addition to working directly with the credit union, working with the regulators and policymakers, we also work with the two associations and working to support their work with their members. And finally, we also manage, for about a year now, we have $1 million liquidity fund that was financed by USAID. That is to support, especially during agriculture seasons, as we have now, liquidity of credit unions and be able to serve the demand. So this is briefly of what we've been doing. I think I should mention also our team. The team has been great, and everybody is, as you're wondering, safe and accounted for. We have unfortunately, some staff members that are serving and supporting Ukraine's army right now as we speak, and we really pray for them every day and their teams on the ground. The rest of the staff has been dispersed across Europe and also in Ukraine in more safer zone. I myself was relocated to Warsaw, Poland. So this is briefly of what we do. So as you see on this map, we try to, as the war began and as it continues, reassess of where we are with our partners. And initially, you know, the first 2 weeks, as I learned this news on the morning of February 24 from my deputy, who called me at 5 a.m. and said the bombarding of Kiev has begun. We've been initially trying to just ensure everybody's safety and everybody's families and as much as we could help our partner credit unions. And then to many surprise of many, we start to regroup and continue our operations. So I think what I want to highlight in this overall on this presentation is the great job that Ukrainian people, credit union members are doing on the ground, but also the fact that it's not just humanitarian work that's ongoing. I understand watching the news, I watch them every day as well, that it's heartbreaking and it feels that it's only the combat zones, right? But there's also lots of people trying to make a living. A war continues and life goes on. And as harsh as it sounds, this is what I'm trying to highlight, that credit unions are lending, they're trying to reopen the doors, they're trying to reach their member, help their members. And this work is ongoing in parallel to the humanitarian work and the crisis that we all know. So this map, as of April, these are our 22 partner credit unions that we selected for this project that are willing to expand their agribusiness, and they had some experience in this sphere. So as you can see, you have some partners in the West that are continuing working in different structures and times, but they still open, they have operations. And then we see the red dots on the map where the active combat zones were, again, as of April 1st. And then we have zones where the credit unions are under occupation. And here I would like to pause, because since we already in May, and if I was doing it today, we already would include Kiev as controlled area by Ukraine, and the same as for Koryukivka. Where I think while we look of, you know, how our partners, and we were prior to the war trying to make those linkages, the development and the size of credit unions in the East was always smaller, and they needed help of the Western colleagues, where historically started earlier and stronger. We are trying to make those ties and work them together. And we had prior, again, I remember in the fall, trips of credit unions from the very East to the West to show them what they can improve and help them with technical assistance. And now we see those linkages are working during this wartime to help and support in this difficult time. In terms of numbers, and many people are asking, what are the losses? Of course, we don't have statistics. Before the war, we had about 182 credit unions that reported to the regulator. We don't have a baseline data as of February. We also know that in March, about 117 credit unions reported, but that's partially due to regulations in place that don't require them to report. So some will do that voluntarily, some will wait, some are not able to put the reports forward. So we don't have completed data, but this again, roughly speaking, about 60 to 65% of assets, or if we look at loan portfolios or deposit portfolio, are right now in areas controlled by Ukraine. Again, it's linked also to the number of credit unions in the West and in the East, also to their size. And this will change in favor of Ukraine and credit unions, because now we can also exclude Kiev and other areas where we knew there were very heavy fights going on, Bucha, Irpin, Kostomel, toward the Ukraine control areas. So with slow steps, we see progress here as well. So what is the reality? I think, again, looking east-west or combat and controlled territories for Ukraine, the reality is very different. And I will later have some illustration to maybe talk about a few examples in more details of what's happening. But generally, in the combat zones or the occupied territories, it's not possible to operate. The staff has been, lives are under threat. We have in places like, I forgot the key name of where the heavy fights are going, I'm sorry. But basically in those places, the staff is not safe. We had cases where the Russian forces are coming into the premises. We understand that right now in those places, we have ruble being pushed as a currency to use to operate, and people are forced to collaborate with occupants. And if you're not, your life becomes a threat. We have credit unions where some staff has been missing and we not be able to reach to them. We have some staff displaced and some missing. I don't have any reports about loss of life at this point. So again, there's a lot of looting going on. We have had a partner, Associated Credit Unions, where they somehow thought of removing hard drives. So the computers are missing, everything was stolen, but they have the hard drives with the data. So this is the reality there. I think to our surprise, we have received as a project, the credit partners report to us, we did receive some reports from even those close credit unions. They're trying really hard to find ways to re-engage and to show that they still in business. And then of course, working on the threats, working with constant sirens going on, it has a huge toll on the psychological, mental ability of people to focus, to work, and the constant worry. In terms of the credit union in the West, again, after initial few weeks where everyone was in shock and the situation was new, the focus was on safety again of the employees, their families and members. And right now we see as a project that there is demand growing for agricultural lending. There are farmers ready to take the risk and credit unions ready to take some risk. Everyone understands that food security is critical and the land has to be farmed. It's not safe to do so. We see a lot of mines in the fields. They are lacking tools and inputs to actually farm and obviously finance. So there is as we know right now, crisis with fuel, amongst others. There is a level of regulatory burden. So for the credit unions that are in the safe zones, there are some flexibilities by the regulator where they don't have to report, for example, but also we have to understand there is they so-called holidays from loans. So we see no repayments. We see no charges, no penalties. We see people being called to army, not repaying loans. So their business is suffering as it is. Again, we see internally and externally displaced staff and the risk of and the situation with sirens and with constant war is equal despite of being in a so-called safer zone. We understand that for the past few days, the whole Ukraine was on alert. So this is just, I thought that it would illustrate of what is left. This is Mariupol. Mariupol has been on the news for quite a while now. We understand there is a few last pockets of Ukrainian soldiers holding grounds. This is a photo of March 12th. So this is what is left from the credit union. And this is another one. And again, I think the words and the news speak for themselves of what is happening there in Azovstal and with that credit union. My understanding is that both of those credit unions were very engaged with operation of United Credit Unions. They are our partners and sit on the board of our two partners that are helping with the Liquidity Fund. Some of their staff is missing. Director of this particular credit union is missing, and his wife. And there is, so, you know, at this point, we cannot even talk about operations of any sort. Right now, it's about getting people, finding the people and getting those who are still left alive out of this situation. So in terms of what we've been able to do since early March, after that initial period of no activity, and again it stands also for the project where we were on the move, we had to adjust. Surprisingly, again, to myself, as we're looking at our plans for the year, and we do have to adjust the timelines and make deviations. Quite a lot of work still goes on, and some of that becomes even more relevant as we think about recovery and relief. So we are working with the credit unions one-on-one with the individuals to develop some business continuity plans, right? So the moment the war ends, we have a victory day, how the business will look like, what adjustment will have to be done. We actually engage with my former colleagues from Palestine, for example, where they understand how to work in operation of wartime and bombarding. And we're trying to capture those lessons learned and transfer them to our Ukrainian colleagues. To understand how to work. And again, they've been working in the wartime for long, and business goes on, right? The business has to continue. So we're trying to help our partners to figure out the way to do that, reach out to members. The other very important thing is cybersecurity and data security. So we managed to find cloud solution outside of Ukraine for our credit union partners who are still able to do so, and our associations and United Credit Unions, to be able to preserve the data and be able to restore it as needed. What else? We have the Liquidity Fund. So the second tranche of the Liquidity Fund was actually disbursed after the war began. And there is demand for agricultural loans and lending. And right now, out of that tranche, about 65% has been dispersed. There is also the first part of that fund also revolving, being dispersed. We also see repayments. And this is remarkable that in this entire war, we see repayments from credit unions that are in the combat areas. That they're still trying to maintain a good record with their United Credit Unions. We also looking now into going back to value chains. We spend a lot of time as a project trying to tap into existing value chain, agricultural value chains, and provide credit, make credit union a partner of those operations for smaller producers. So we are looking now into restoring some of that work, but also looking to how the new value chains will be forming or restructure after this period of war, and how we can tap in and support small producers who have no otherwise access to any finances and any financial services for that matter. We have to remember credit unions are also depositor takers. And on that, what I can say is that we see both. We were initially afraid and saw some outflow of deposits, but we also saw inflow. So again, depending on the individual member risk as assessment, some would bring their cash back to credit union, say this is place safer for me. Some would want to have cash at hand in case they had to run. So we said both, but we didn't see any dramatic outflow of deposits. We also providing already psychological support that's open for credit union, for their staff. Also for our staff, we understand that this is a very difficult time, and we're trying to support and be able to provide stuff for their personal life, but also for how to work with a distressed member client who lost potentially everything, and how to work and how to conduct a simple conversation with such situations. Finally, and I think my colleagues will talk more about it, we are supporting, we're working hand in hand with WOCCU Foundation. We have implementing two aid programs. One will support credit unions and farmers with a portion of the loan repayment principal. We're gonna contribute to that, and the second will be toward diesel access for farmers. As I mentioned, there is a fuel crisis and farmers cannot access enough diesel. And finally, we are closely coordinating with Ukrainian diaspora to also, I guess, join efforts and make sure that the support, again, we understand there is a humanitarian need. We as a project are not structured to provide humanitarian assistance on a larger scale, but we're looking to find a way to support credit unions in the areas that are now back under Ukrainian control, to restore their operations, and also in the long term support the sector as a whole, and ensure it has all it needs to not only recover, but to grow and get stronger. So these are specific. I was focusing more on operation of credit unions, but we have to remember that credit unions are rooted in their communities. And some of our earlier work and some of our, I guess, initiative or improvements were allow them or enable them to now have more time. We are working as a project on digitalization. We are improving processes, efficiencies. And so we now see that the staff in their capacities can be more active on and help their communities. And we've seen many spectrum of ideas and things being done, and collaboration, as I mentioned, between different credit unions in different regions, as we see Lviv and the West become a hub, but also a shelter state for the East. So we've seen credit unions and their staff organizing warehouse to sort, package, disperse humanitarian ads. We've seen them coordinating, ensuring that refugees or displaced people have everything they need to restart their lives. We've seen a tourist hub turn into, again, a hub for hosting refugees. We have credit unions operating energy bars production from local fruits and nuts that are produced in the region. what we also see, and I think that also will become the future of recovery, is that digitalization and going online in those times, but also after the war, will become and is critical. We have damaged infrastructure. We lost touch with staff members. We lost touch with members of credit unions and their families, borrowers, and depositors. So again, we spend a lot of time focusing on digitalization and making sure the credit unions are better and catching up to other financial institutions with that. And I think we now see that they're very efficiently applying some of the skills to help with different call centers where they can connect people using their own facilities to provide consultation, become kind of a community help hub where you can call and receive information about anything you might need as a displaced person. So generally, I think in those very difficult times, we see that the work we've done, that the skills we help build are there. They're being used for the best of the communities and Ukraine right now. And I hope for the recovery we can continue working with our partners and hopefully restore all the operations. Thank you. I understand we'll have a question and answer session after all the presentations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Eva. I think that was a really insightful view of what credit unions across the country are facing, and in the conflict zones especially. So thank you so much. And we will have a question and answer period at the end. We also want to let people know, if you are getting a lot out of this webinar and you want to recommend it to others, it will be on our YouTube channel later today at youtube.com/WOCCU. Up next is Andy Price. He serves as Senior Vice President of International Advocacy and General Counsel for World Council of Credit Unions. Specific to Ukraine, Andy has been working with the CAP project to ensure credit unions are getting the assistance they need from Ukraine's credit union regulator, the National Bank of Ukraine, which has taken on a great deal more urgency since the start of the war. And Andy is here to explain more about that. Andy?
Yeah, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I've been working with the CAP project in Ukraine for close to 5 years now. I've been there on several occasions and met with the National Bank of Ukraine. And I just want a quick shout out because I saw Ludmila Kravchenko chime in, and pleased to see her on the call today. Appreciate all the work that you're doing. Who represents one of the associations, represents a lot of the credit unions there. Thank you for all the work you're doing. I think Ava set the stage nicely for me. What blows my mind still is to see what all the credit unions are still doing. They're still lending, they're still serving their members. And I say I'm surprised, but gosh, these are credit unions. I'm not really surprised. They're always there for their members and serving them. But it's just incredible the things that are going on in that area. I want to give you just a little bit of background as to kind of where we are, what the Ukraine was going through with respect to their financial systems. Prior to the conflict, they had the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement, which it's kind of like the dating process for joining into the EU. And that's a formal agreement that they make, and Ukraine had agreed, particularly with, there's a lot of things in there they agreed to, but with respect to the financial sector, was really to bring their kind of banking regulations in line with the EU standards. So they were going through a process of really developing their financial regulatory oversight. And that had a lot of impact on credit unions as there. One of the things in there that they were working on was, the providing deposit insurance for credit unions. That was in the works, and I hope is still in the works, frankly, at this time. But there was a lot of revisions going on with respect to the regulations, the capital standards, the accounting standards, the reporting. one of the things that happened was that they used to be regulated by the National Commission on Financial Services, which really was an insurance regulator, and they also regulated the non-banking financial sector, some of the finance companies there, and they also had credit unions. Credit unions were the only deposit-taking entity under their regulation, and then so as part of this process of revising their standards, the regulation of those credit unions was moved to the National Bank of Ukraine, which was a good thing. It's an agency that has a lot more resources. They're familiar with deposit-taking entities. They have examiner, they have a staff and wonderful people that work there, very competent people that work there. So I think this was a good thing for credit union. There is a downside to that, though, is because they were not familiar with credit unions, and so a lot of my work prior to the conflict was educating them on the differences of credit unions that were member-owned institutions, were community-based. The governance is run by the members. The members elect their boards from their own. A lot of these concepts were new to them, and a lot of the kind of differences between a bank and a credit union. Although a lot of the concepts are very similar, there are a lot of differences there, and so we were going through the process of helping them to understand this process. We were also helping them to, they had an influx, a whole industry of credit unions came over into their jurisdiction, and so they had to figure out, well, how are we going to do this? How are we going to supervise them? What are going to be the role of the associations? The central credit unions. How are we going to examine them all? How's the reporting going to work? All of these things were in the process of being fleshed out. We had the draft law on credit unions, which again was designed to kind of reform some of the standards, and a lot of these things were they are extremely positive because they were providing a nice prudential regulatory framework, a safe and sound framework, one that it's going to help the credit unions, I think, grow and be postured for the future. And then, lo and behold, we had the conflict come in, and a lot of these things are now having to be put on hold. The main kind of focus now is you really gotta kind of change your mindset. There are a lot of these things that we want to have in place during good times. They're good and proper, but you really have to change your mindset when you have a conflict. The most important thing is just to keep the credit unions up and running, keep them contributing to the real economy. Some of the bells and whistles that you might have, the reporting and whatnot, maybe some of those things can be put on hold. Are you perhaps going to have some losses that occur? Yeah, but the overall good that you're going to have by keeping your credit unions running and contributing to the economy is going to be a good thing. Yeah, there we go. So some of the early regulatory measures that came out from the National Bank of Ukraine, they were kind of active in this area. A lot of, you heard Eva mention, kind of a lot of relief from the regulatory reporting, the annual reports, a lot of those things. We know there's credit unions in conflict area. They're either, they're just, you can't blame them at all for not doing it. Either they're not going to do it or they're not going to have time. So being a stickler and some of those kind of things doesn't matter. Some of the investments they can do were affected by the war, so you're giving them a little bit of flexibility there. Relief for conducting your General Assembly. Some of us in the United States, your annual meeting is kind of a check the box thing, happens kind of routinely. In a lot of countries around the world, the General Assembly is actually quite important and is a big deal, where you have elections, you approve the financials, approve the payment of a dividend, and whatnot. So some of those things kind of came out early. Martial law was imposed, which was a good thing and a bad thing. Obviously, it gave a lot of relief to those inscripted from having to make their payments. It gave the regulator the ability to waive a lot of laws that were in place, and so it's kind of a double-edged sword there. But that the martial law has a significant impact on the ability of, well, whether or not people are or have to repay their loans, and the effect on the operations of a credit union. Okay. Yeah, so some of the ongoing challenges we're having, supporting the liquidity for credit unions. We're wonderful. We have the USAID project that has the $1 million liquidity fund that's going in. That is helping out to support the ongoing lending. We're working with the MBU to see if they can't provide some more of that. One of the things I kind of gave you the background on the EU-Ukraine agreement, and the credit unions were new. So one of the things that we're trying to make sure is that MBU kind of what they do for the banks, we want them to do for credit unions as well. So making sure we get treated equally, don't make us look like, hey, we're kind of a secondary afterthought, if you will. Because one of the things we want the regulator to do is to provide, the messaging to the public that, hey, you can still go to a credit union and get your services for well. So that's one of the things we're actually working with them on, to see perhaps if maybe they want to accelerate this process that was in place with providing deposit insurance. Hopefully we're going to get through the conflict here soon. We all pray for that. None of us really know. I'm not predicting anyway otherwise, but once you get through and you can kind of do a risk assessment and work with those credit unions that still have the ability to continue to lend and continue to provide, providing them with deposit insurance, it gives a real good message from the government that, hey, these institutions are up and running. They're going to be there to help rebuild the economy, to support the economy. I'm hoping that process can kind of get accelerated with them. The second area is, providing those financial resources from the government to help support the credit unions to get going, and particularly for credit unions who are in those agricultural reasons that, food security, and we all know the wheat and all the products they produce, and how much that supports not only Ukraine but the rest of the world, frankly, getting that back up and running. And when those credit unions are in those areas that are doing that plan, providing support to keep those going is going to be crucial. So that's an area that we're going to be working on as well. So moving on to my next slide. So thinking through kind of the approach, moving forward, there's several things that we're thinking of. Number one is a really lightened regulatory. Well, it's not number one on my slide there, but a lightened regulatory approach that kind of gets rid of all the bells and whistles and just really gets our credit unions back to lending. You're going to need for that for a while, and that's kind of a challenge because we had all these reforms that are coming down that are in place, the draft law that was going into effect. And the regulator wants a lot of these things, and I do too, frankly, at the right time. But I think there's going to need to be an interim period to get us back to that point, just so we can kind of get through the conflict. Hopefully it ends soon. But the approach that we're kind of articulating with them is kind of really to do a risk assessment. There are those who can clearly operate it. There's those that are going to be in the areas controlled by Russia. There's those who have branches in the affected area. There's those who have kind of suffered significant damage. We can probably stratify this a little more, but that's kind of how you want to separate them up. And those that can keep lending, just let them go, let them keep doing what they're doing. And then those other problem areas you can kind of focus on. I think the role of the associations, if you want to call it kind of self-regulatory association, that can be an area where perhaps they can help out, at least during an interim through this period. Digitization is I think a wonderful opportunity to provide the mechanisms where the use of technology, rebuilding is going to be difficult, getting in supplies to rebuild the branches and whatnot. Having the idea of a virtual credit union is not that far out of reach. Set up somebody in an office with an iPad and now they can conduct business. I mean, that's an easier, cheaper, quicker way to rebuild and get your credit union lending. I think these things are being considered, and I think are just fast. You heard Ava talk about, some of the cloud services are being offered. I don't understand half of this stuff, but it is a clear way that it can be used, and is really I think a wonderful time for Ukraine to help as we come out of this. I mean, they can be on the cutting edge of technology, frankly, coming through the thing. So I'll kind of conclude here. The real focus at this time is, number one, keeping the credit unions lending so they can support the real economy, and then helping the NBU. We've been providing them. By the way, we've been providing with examples. All we've done that. WOCCU's done this in Rwanda and Haiti and a couple other places. We've also engaged the National Credit Union Administration, who has been helping us out here. They have a lot of experience with disasters, Katrina and you think otherwise. They've also been providing support, and it's good to have a regulator talk to a regulator and not just the trade association. So they've actually been in here and providing support as well. We've been getting support, by the way, from all of, and I thank you for everybody for that. And so those are my comments about just some of the quick things about what's going on with Ukraine, at least from a regulatory standpoint. And thank you for having me on, and thank you everybody for being here today.
Thanks, Andy. I think that's a great presentation in terms of clearing up kind of where things were and how things have changed and what we're looking at going forward from a regulatory standpoint. And again, if you have questions, please use the Q&A button. It's at the bottom of your screen. If you click on the three dots down there and pop those open, you'll find the Q&A button, and you can type your questions in there. Many of you joining us today have been gracious enough to donate to the Ukrainian Credit Union Displacement Fund. That was started just a few days after the war began. It's managed by Mike Reiter. He is the executive director for our Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions. He joins us now with an update on the Displacement Fund and how the Foundation and World Council are planning to use your donations going forward. Mike?
Thanks, Greg. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. As Greg alluded to, many of you have contributed either individually or on behalf of your institutions to the Worldwide Foundation's Ukrainian Credit Union Displacement Fund. And on behalf of the foundation and our board, we are extremely grateful for the support that we can then leverage in collaboration with the national associations of Ukraine's credit union system and the Ukrainian credit unions directly. I just wanted to provide just a very brief update on the Worldwide Foundation's role to play in the work that we continue to do in collaboration with Ukraine's credit union system. And as Greg alluded to, we opened, as we always have historically done with respect to international credit union disaster relief efforts, our disaster relief fund, and specifically created a fund to support Ukrainian's credit union system in the wake of what's occurring over there with the war and the invasion. And so the purpose of the fund is really twofold: to provide a level of financial support to support specific needs of the credit unions and their respective members and their staff in this immediate term, in this relief short term. But also we need, as Andy alluded to and Eva alluded to, we need to be thinking long term as well. And historically, the Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions Disaster Relief Fund has deployed a significant amount of its relief aid funding to the rebuilding, the restructuring, the strategic repivoting of credit union systems around the world. And there's a significant opportunity here to support the Ukrainians and their credit union system in that reconstruction, rebuilding effort. So a couple of the areas of relief areas of concern that we have gotten feedback from the national associations and their respective credit union members. We've gotten advice from Ava and the CAP team, ancillary partners, U.S. credit union diaspora leaders in the U.S., Canadian Ukrainian diaspora leaders, as well as other partners as well. And these are a few of the areas of concern that we plan on deploying a portion of the displacement fund to. Ongoing credit union operations, ensuring that credit unions continue to operate and stay able to stay open and continue to serve their members. Ava mentioned two agricultural lending schemes or projects that the fund will continue to support, both with a fuel coupon scheme as well as agri lending reimbursement scheme as well. So that is ongoing in collaboration with the CAP team. And then obviously we want to be as agile and as flexible with the fund as we possibly can, not having a crystal ball and knowing what much of the displacement needs will be of Ukrainian credit unions as an entity, but also the individuals. And we know that, and as you'll hear from our Polish colleagues, there's a significant amount of humanitarian and refugee support work that's being done in the adjacent credit union systems. And so how can we be prudent in holding in reserve a percentage or a portion of those funds as well to support the ongoing refugee crisis? So just a little bit of a deeper dive analytically in terms of the fund distribution, and the Worldwide Foundation has created a playbook that is going to help with input from all of our internal stakeholders at World Council, as well as external stakeholders, the two national associations, the diaspora communities in the US and Canada, specifically the World Council of Ukrainian Cooperatives. All these bodies have we are looking for their input to help us craft a playbook that is going to be deploying this fund responsibly, transparently, and safely and securely to the parties and the entities that need it the most, both for the short term and the long term. So from a distribution perspective, the playbook has set forth a 35, 60, and 5% ratio breakout of how the fund will be dispersed over these two key areas of relief and recovery, as well as over the short term and the long term. So we're looking at roughly 35% of the fund balance going to the immediate term, 60% going to this long-term recovery, reconstruction, rebuilding, and then 5% remains to support the ongoing overhead and fund administration, the marketing, and the PR of how the funds are being spent, the stories hopefully that we can get back from the beneficiaries of the fund, long-term, short-term. And also from a donor analytics perspective, just a significant amount of donations have come in such a short amount of time. On average, the Worldwide Foundation averages between 300 and 400 donors a year on average. You can see almost 1,500 donors, individuals, institutions from across the US and internationally have contributed very generously to the fund. Many credit unions have created their own peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns where they're challenging their members and their boards and their management to raise a certain amount, and the credit union as an institution will match that amount dollar for dollar. And that has proved to be a supremely successful fundraising tactic, specifically in the US credit union system. But to date, we have roughly $1.3 million. And actually, we just received another $20,000 donation yesterday. So we're up to close to $1,350,000 with the fund. US credit unions, US league system, US credit union partners, the CUSO system, other system foundations, and individuals have been very generous in supporting and contributing. And then the international credit union community has also stepped forward to provide a level of funding and support to the fund as well. So what did we do in the immediate term? Again, we don't self-promote ourselves, or in reality, do we have the capacity or even the key mission of doing what the Red Cross does, what other humanitarian NGOs do? But we truly did want to provide a level of initial support to the humanitarian crisis. And we collaborated based on recommendations from our CAP team in country. We selected and partnered with PARD, the Podolian Agency for Regional Development, which is located in Vinica, and provided a grant of $50,000 to provide a level of immediate support in the form of food supplies, medical equipment, supplies, shelter goods, and actually venues that PARD provides to provide shelter to the displaced Ukrainian citizens. We provided that level of short-term support in the weeks following the initial invasion. And if you think of how our fund will be leveraged or dispersed, think of it in two phases: the relief phase as well as the recovery phase. So short-term versus long-term. The relief phase, we are really looking to collaborate directly with the two national associations within Ukraine, the diaspora communities around the world, specifically the US and Canada, other ancillary partners from the philanthropic sector. So the Irish Credit Union League Foundation, credit union foundations in Canada and elsewhere around the world that may have an interest in pooling greater philanthropic dollars together to both fuel and fund this short-term and long-term phase. But as Ava said, we will be partnering with the CAP project on funding two $100,000 schemes, one to continue to provide fuel in the form of fuel coupons to Ukrainian credit union members who continue to harvest their crops and take advantage of the planting season to mitigate at least a component of the global food insecurity crisis that is already unfolding with respect to Ukraine. And then obviously providing a level of reimbursement with respect to agri lending to members of participating credit unions as well. And then obviously phase two, which we have historically deferred to our colleagues at World Council and their project development team to again collaborate with all sector actors, the credit union national associations, the credit unions themselves, our colleagues in the European Credit Union Network, as well as other actors, USAID and other large-scale donors, to be thinking through what is the rebuilding and recovery plan for Ukraine's credit union system. It truly is an opportunity, as Andy alluded to advance greater digitization, digital member experience, tackle a lot of regulatory and legislative barriers that Ukraine's credit union system is facing. So Worldwide Foundation is honored and proud to be able to provide a significant level of funding toward that effort. And so this last slide is just a workflow slide or a flow chart of how we at the Worldwide Foundation and our task force, the task force that we've helped create with World Council, that is comprised of the national associations, Ukrainian credit union diaspora groups, foundations, like I said, to kind of identify here's how we're breaking out the fund, here are the percentages of the fund that we're going to be deploying to, and how the different actors play amongst one another. Again, it's not a fully refined plan. We're still getting feedback from all the different actors to try to make it the best plan that we can in this fluid situation. And it will continue to be fluid as the war continues to unfold. And we truly hope that the war ends as quickly as possible so that the work of Ukrainians credit unions can continue to serve members, especially in the conflict in the occupied territories. So on behalf of myself and the board, we're really grateful to every one of you who have contributed that are on the webinar today. And we assume that the need will continue to be great as Ukraine continues to push back against the Russian invasion. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Mike. I think a lot of people, again, who gave a great update on kind of where we are with the fund, where things are going, what we want to accomplish. So we really appreciate your time as well. World Council's direct member credit union association in Poland, the National Association of Cooperative Savings and Credit Unions, or NACSCU, has been working to assist both internally displaced Ukrainians as well as Ukrainian refugees in Poland since the start of the war. In 2020, World Council and NACSCU developed the Regional Credit Union Center for Central and Eastern Europe together to help provide education and support for all of our member credit union associations and their credit unions in that region. Pavel Peltz is the coordinator of the Regional Credit Union Center. And to conclude today's event, he and Piotr Palka, head of compliance and legal counsel for NACSCU, have more on exactly how they have worked to provide assistance in this time of need. Pavel?
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to have opportunity to present Polish experience during this webinar, which is co-hosted also by our Regional Credit Union Center. So it's really important also to present this experience, as Poland is one of the countries bordering with Ukraine. Before the war, there was quite large Ukrainian community in Poland. Typically, people working temporarily in Poland. It was something like 1.5 million people in Poland. Some of them moved back to Ukraine, but the other way, starting the war, it was something like more than 3 million people crossing the Ukrainian-Polish border. So refugees, typically women and children, that's something like more than 90%, as due to martial law. The men aged 18 to 60 cannot cross the Ukrainian border. And of course, Poland has reacted to such a situation. It was the reaction of government, self-government, individuals, as well as non-governmental organizations, including credit unions. So it is also very important to compare this crisis with other ones, that even though that you have more than 3 million people crossing to Poland. Of course, some of them moved further or went back to Ukraine. You cannot find, camps for refugees or something like that. They were taken to homes or other institutions. So this is a huge mobilization how to help them. And in this area of activity, also a credit union system was engaged. It was engaged in various levels, especially on the level of WOCCU, the level of association, as well as the level of credit unions. In case of the level of association, we were engage in fundraising from employees of WOCCU, especially that, for us, it was also, experience with people we knew, because we cooperate with this CAP project, which Ewa Sierżyńska has presented earlier. So before the war, we presented our experience, our regulatory advice or something like that, and then occur after the war has started that some of them are not discussing with us what to present to the central bank as the supervisor, but they are fighting for their country. So it was really a change. And based on this, with cooperation with CAP project and other credit unions, we are able to manage and organize some support which was needed, like finding a car which wasn't available in Ukraine, but was available in Poland. It was financed by the diaspora credit unions from Canada and transported to the border by somebody from the CAP project, and then collected by a member of one of the Ukrainian credit unions. What shows that all that activity is possible due to cooperation, due to contacts with other non-governmental organizations, like this collection of sleeping bags, blankets, and flashlights and other stuff, which was transferred to Odessa, or in cooperation with the president's office, we were able to finance the transport, the travel of ambulances to Ukraine, because there was a need to cover cost of fuel and accommodation or something like that. Also, we were able to support people from Polish minorities still living in Ukraine, especially in western part of this country. So on the association level, there was also a coordination, but also you could find a lot of experiences and examples of support on the level of credit unions. Credit unions in Poland are situated in various places in Poland, and you could see the results of their activity in this presentation. For example, SKOK Chmielewskiego. This is SKOK situated in the Lublin city, which is closer to the Ukrainian border. This is one of two credit unions operating there. So they organized of internal fundraising, collection of funds with non-governmental organizations like Caritas of relevant archdiocese, in this case Lublin, to buy a power generator, or helping a group of refugees residing in Lublin. Also, there were cases when the credit union supports their employees, which are taking places to
4:00
support
p.m.
Refugees. So also other credit unions from other cities had their own activities, like fundraising or cooperation with other non-governmental organizations. And also it is very important to stress that this especially important was help of children from orphanage, and transport materials directly to Ukraine when there was possible to manage this due to context. Also, WOCCU as well as credit unions were in direct contact with Ukrainian consulates, like in Gdańsk or in Lublin, to find out what is especially needed and how to manage transport of goods into Ukraine if it is needed. And another efforts we started in Poland after solving this accommodation issues, and whereas this first step, direct humanitarian support, there were questions how to help include Ukrainian refugees into financial system in Poland, as due to decision of our government, the refugees from Ukraine could obtain Polish personal identification numbers. And so far, it looks that about 1/3 of those who crossed the border from Ukraine to Poland, so more than 1 million refugees, obtain this Polish identification number, and having this number, they could use public services in Poland, and also could be identified by financial institutions, including credit unions. So starting from the biggest credit union in Poland, Kasa Stawczyka, we've started trying to allow these refugees joining credit unions to use the financial services, because as they also could work in Poland due to these regulations, as well as some of them are trying to rent flats or something like that, they really have to have access to the financial services, to the account and other financial tools like payment cards or something like that. So we are trying, to look forward, not only to this direct needs today, but also allow them to better operate in Polish society as long as they are on refuge, as there is no possibility to return to Ukraine, to their home. And now I would like to switch floor to Piotr Pałka.
Hello. I would like to tell you a few words about the long-term challenge. IA fighting with the Russian propaganda, especially from the WOCCU view, where young professionals can make use of the social media means and to share the truth about the situation in Ukraine. I would like to stress that from our point of view, there is no place for political correctness, etc. Because in Ukraine, people are encountering and experiencing genocide. Women, children, and even infants are being raped. So the goal is to provide information, the truth, as if we know the truth, we know how to act. And from this place, I would like to encourage everybody to engage in this area. For example, I can give you an example that when it comes to the propaganda, in many countries, Russian TV channels are still operating. For example, in Poland, Russia Today has been blocked, and we know that we can not only support, which is also crucial, with all that engagement that we just heard about, but we can also help with providing the truth by sharing the information with other people, because by sharing this information, by sharing the truth, is also helping, because as I stated before, as we know the truth, we can know how to act, and we know how to support. So this is a brief information conclusion from the young professional, from the WOCCU perspective. As you can see, all these pictures are being prohibited in Russia. So we want to share this information. We want to tell all these stories, even using the webinars, and as I said before, please share the information also using the social media. It's crucial for the Ukrainian people. So I would like to thank you for the attention, and if you have any questions, please do not hesitate. We are here ready to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Piotr and Pavel. And it's really remarkable, really from day one, what the Polish credit unions were doing to help assist with humanitarian support right away for the Ukrainians, and also kind of the way they've just opened their arms to Ukrainians who are in Poland now, both with humanitarian assistance and then also offering financial services. It's been great to see, and obviously it's been needed, and it's going to continue to be needed. We don't have any questions from any of the people who are watching today's webinar yet for the panelists, but if you do have questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Again, that's the Q&A section. You can type it in there, and we'll ask questions of the presenters here as it comes up. But I just had one question, I guess, and this can be taken by either Andy or Eva. Do you think that there are steps that NBU, you expect them to take in the next, and when I say NBU, that's the National Bank of Ukraine, that you expect to be taken here in the next month or two, or that you're hoping are taken in the next month or two to assist the credit unions on the ground to be able to permit them to do more lending and so forth?
And do you want me to take it? So I think it's hard to predict what and how will happen in Ukraine and how the regulator will act in response. And we are with Andrew and other experts looking to actually start a conversation from the NBU from scratch. We spent 4 years trying to support a new law on credit unions that would be more modern, would open credit union to more opportunities and provide a broader spectrum of services. That law, unfortunately, did not pass through the second reading. So we are right now at the crossroads, and I think also an opportunity, a painful one, where we can engage NBU, and that's what we are currently doing, to start that conversation basically from scratch. We don't know where this war will end, what will be the losses. And we have to look deeper into different categories of credit unions and how they should operate, how to restore them. And the law and the new framework and then regulatory framework that will go with that should account for those different realities on the ground. It's not just every credit union is right now the same. We'll have different situation, and the law must allow that. And also we have to look into new credit unions being established. And that's something also the law should provide for. So I stop here. Again, this is where the dialogue with the regulators is ongoing with WOCCU support and expertise. And that's where we hope we can start now. So not to wait until the war ends, but be ready and have some conceptual ideas in place before that would then allow us to work on a more technical level with the details. Thank you.
Andy, do you have any follow-up thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are. I know we have floated a lot of things by them, and it's complicated and tricky. And anything that I say, I don't mean to criticize them, because it's a difficult situation. There is a lot of relief. You know, a lot of loans are not being repaid. A lot of them are not being paid because of martial law. I mean, there's all kinds of consequences of that. And so I think a lot of the accounting kind of relief, are we going to let them kind of maybe, you know, at some point reset their balance sheets? They call it refinancing in the country. You know, let's kind of take stock of the situation and kind of maybe reset it. I think would give a lot of relief. I think the most important thing that they can really do is, you know, is the financial support that they can give to them to help them just to continue to let's get through this situation. Hopefully it ends soon. You know, but just kind of take it in mind that we just got to get through this period and then get back to a position, you know, because you got to keep the lending going. Otherwise your economy is not going to work. They're doing some of these things on the banking side. I hope they mirror that on the credit union side, and I think they will. But again, I mean, these things are tricky and complicated. So it's not an issue of you know, will it? I think they will. It's going to be a process. So.
Thanks, Andy. We do have a question for Piotr, since Piotr, you've expressed some experience with this, Piotr, but Reitz wants to know, is there any way we can connect to Russian citizens and to make them aware of what their president is doing in Ukraine, the human disaster he's calling? In other words, is it useful to send short messages to Russian organizations such as universities, hospitals, companies, etc.? What can we do?
Thank you for this question. I think every action is crucial, and I can give you an example. We of course also have friends, very good friends from WOCCU from Russia, but unfortunately they have been disinformed, and Polish WOCCU tried to provide them with information about the true situation and what is happening in Ukraine, but many social media have been blocked. So this is it's not easy to provide this information, but I think also sending even short messages with the situation, with the information of the situation in Ukraine is also crucial. I can tell you that it is interesting that the Polish people invented an application that has been introduced by Anonymous, and everyone can send a message using this application to the Russian citizens, even by posting short information and comments at the restaurants' sites, websites. So whatever we do is crucial. If we can share this information on Facebook, on Instagram, or using a Telegram, very popular communicator in the Eastern countries, is crucial, is something it can be our support by sharing this information. So I think we can also change our attitude to sharing the information. And even if you have friends among your Facebook profile that if they have Russian roots, etc., we can provide them with the information. We can ask them if they know what is happening in Russia. Even traveling, if you travel to other countries, you can meet the Russian tourists. Of course, it can also be dangerous. We could hear stories about the encounters in the resorts. So I think whatever we do and how we share this information is not important. The most important thing is to share this information by any means we can imagine, we can make it out. So this is my conclusion. This is my answer.
Thank you, Peter. Paul wants to know, and this is probably a question for Mike Reiter, I wonder how credit unions can continue operations in such complicated circumstances. If I understand correctly, you mentioned as an example a voucher scheme for gasoline. Can you describe this system in some more detail and perhaps give more examples of adapted operations of the credit unions? And I guess that's probably a second question. But Mike, if you want to respond to the first on the voucher scheme for gasoline.
Yeah. Great question, Paul. I think just as a caveat, just know that the gas scheme is being created in collaboration with AVA's CAP team project, as well as the Worldwide Foundation, who will provide the funding to get it up off the ground and providing key support to agri lenders. But in its current draft form, Worldwide Foundation would purchase from a vetted fuel company in Ukraine a certain amount of fuel liters that would be leveraged by agri producers that are members of qualifying credit unions that are already part of the CAP project's agricultural lending working group. And the eligible members that would receive these fuel coupons and the concept is that they would get these fuel coupons at the credit unions that they're members of. They would get that fuel coupon and be able to turn that coupon in for a specific amount of fuel that then they could leverage to continue to operate their equipment and machinery. We're the tentative timeline is to have the project vetted and approved by the end of this month, so that we can begin to deploy that fuel scheme within short order in the early weeks of June. With respect to what are some of the other activities that are happening? Again, the other complementary scheme that we're collaborating on with the CAP team is the agricultural reimbursement loan project, which somewhat dovetails and goes hand in hand with the fuel scheme as well. So when I talked about the flow chart and how grants are going to be distributed from the Worldwide Foundation, there will be some private entities like the fuel company that we will have to work with and actually enter into a contract with to be able to deploy that critical component of the fuel scheme.
Thanks, Mike. Oleg wants to know, and I know this question has been asked a lot, and Andy, I don't know if you're the best or if Eva's the best, but to answer this, but what else in addition to supporting the Ukraine fund financially can U.S. credit unions do to help Ukraine and its credit unions there? And that might be something that they might not be able to do anything now, or it might be something they'll be able to do in the future. But Andy, I don't know, or Ev, if you want to field that. And if not, that's okay.
I mean, obviously we're in awards. I mean, going there, I couldn't travel there, but I mean, credit unions are already helping with a lot of technical experience and expertise that's being able to share through the CAP project. I mean, I don't know how many volunteers we've had come through there. I think once if we can, God willing, ever get to a point where the crisis stabilizes, I think that's when there's going to be a real opportunity to provide just a ton of support, because that's when we can all travel and communicate and visit and get there. And I mean, supporting the foundation is a wonderful way to do it now. But I think once the crisis stabilizes, I think there'll be a real opportunity for us to start engaging in those real exchanges, and not only providing technical expertise, but just support and otherwise to help out. It's going to be a long rebuilding process, in my opinion. I mean, you kind of think about Marshall Plan post World War II, took a long time, but that's the likely scenario that we're going to be in. God willing, with none of us who really knows much of what's going to happen in the future.
Eva, if you have any, and then Mike.
Well, it's hard. It's extremely, thank you, first of all, for support that we're already receiving. I mean, I think that until this war is over, it's hard to assess the damage and the needs, and they've asked. And as I said, we will have different needs on the credit union level, individual, right? We have to restore operations. There are things that project itself can do, and there are things that we cannot do. And we have credit unions that have no windows and no computers and just nothing to work with and want to restore. There are some that will have to be very creative and with reaching out to their members. And this is where the big investment in digital side of operation would come in place. We have worked with our partners. We'll likely need more liquidity as business starts picking up. We also need expertise. And I think and Oleg is coming from a diaspora credit union. And we always understand that the language barrier and the cultural barriers are hard to bend. And I think we always appreciate this direct communication in Ukrainian between experts, and just sharing the expertise and the vast knowledge that U.S. credit unions have. And that's on the level of the credit unions themselves, on the level of the association or United Credit Unions, but that also is true for the regulator. I'm sure that after the war, discussion about the deposit guarantee fund will become live again. And expertise and understanding of how it's supposed to be structured and how it's supposed to work will come to play. There's the new law, there is the new regulations that Andy talked about. So I think there is a lot of needs, but we need to understand what is the baseline here? Where do we start from? and we can spring off that forward into the future of the movement in Ukraine.
Thanks, Eva.
And I should also mention, you can urge your congressman to fund USAID to help fund WOCCU as well, as another nice proactive. By the way, I think there is a lot of money that's going to come down to help Ukraine to that end. I mean, I say that kind of jokingly, but it is true. And we are actively engaged in that dialogue. So urge your congressman to tell USAID to support the work that WOCCU is doing, particularly because we're some of the only credit unions in the agricultural region that they're really concerned about for purposes of food insecurity around the world.
Yeah.
Mike Ryder, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on what Andy and Eva both said. You know, this is a historic opportunity for all of us that work and are passionate within the credit union space, the collaboration that, you know, it's in our DNA as credit union people to cooperate and collaborate together. So there are a lot of groups, people that represent all types of different actors in this space that want to support Ukraine. How do we all come together and lead and create to Andy's point, a Marshall Plan, a reconstruction plan that really, you know, achieves a lot of these long-term goals that I think all of us have wanted to see achieved in the past. And it's going to be a true opportunity to be able to leverage foundation dollars to get large donors like USAID and others, non-governmental, to provide a large scale amount of financial resources to then see that plan, that strategic rebuilding plan implemented. So I would just say that from the philanthropic funding side, you know, the short term and the long term, those needs are going to continue to still be there. So I can say that the Worldwide Foundation is looking to collaborate with other like foundations and philanthropic actors and our donor base, of course, across the U.S. and internationally, to continue to create a strong pipeline of funding, because it's going to be a long-term need to help support Ukraine's credit union system.
Indeed. Well, with that, we're coming up on the bottom of the hour here, so I want to let people get on with their days, but really insightful comments from everyone, and I think just about everybody who joined us today got a lot out of this, and hopefully has a lot to think about, and I guess can maybe go on and tell some other folks what they heard. I want to remind folks that today's webinar was recorded. It is going to be available later today on the World Council YouTube channel. That is at youtube.com/WOCCU. Again, that should be available sometime in the next 4 or 5 hours. And if you're interested in hearing more about World Council's work in Ukraine, I recommend you listen to the most recent episode of the Global Credit Union podcast, 36 Hours in Jezus. It recounts World Council President and CEO Alyssa Makar-Labor's trip to Poland in April, where she held several high-level meetings on how we can further help Ukraine. You can find that episode at anchor.fm/WOCCU. And you can continue to follow the work our international credit union community is doing to assist Ukraine by checking out our Ukrainian crisis response blog. That is available at WOCCU.org, right on our website, and you'll see a tab on the top of the website that says Ukrainian crisis response. You can also go to WOCCU.org/Ukrainian_crisis_response. That's it, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.